Get ready with me to become a doll. Just kidding, with or without makeup, I'm obviously already a doll. But in all seriousness, I recently did a poll on my Instagram story asking you guys if you would be interested in seeing like my go-to default like full glam makeup tutorial. Like this is the kind of makeup that I would wear when I'm going out somewhere, when I want to look cute, when I want to take pictures, when I want to feel my cuntiest. Exhibit A and Exhibit B. So first to start, I've already moisturized and put on some lip balm to keep the skin nice and hydrated underneath the makeup because best believe we're going to need it, especially when I get into these powders. So to prime, I'm gonna go in with the One Size Secure the Blur, and then the One Size Secure the Sweat on top. This will help with blurring all these pores and texture, and then this will help with controlling oil and preserving the makeup while sweating and while my skin gets oily throughout the day. So I like to go in with Secure the Blur on my entire face. And then next I'm gonna go in with a tiny little dime-sized amount of Secure the Sweat and gently pat it into my T-zone where I get the oiliest. So now I'm gonna go in with two concealers in order to pre-conceal and color correct the face prior to putting on any foundation in order to use up less product overall. So first I'm gonna go in with this concealer that's my exact skin shade in order to color correct and conceal any hyperpigmentation, any dark spots, or any acne that I may have. And then next, I'm gonna go in with this concealer in the shade Orange to go ahead and conceal and correct any areas that have any grayish, bluish undertones, such as areas like my under eyes or my 5 o'clock shadow, so I don't get clocked in these streets. Okay, so now this is what the skin is giving now that I've pre-concealed all of my imperfections, all of my secrets, and all of my sins. Okay, so moving on, I'm gonna go on to foundation. So the foundation that I'm currently obsessed with is the one from Patrick Ta. As you can clearly see, she's been ran through and in desperate need of a restock. But I'm just gonna use that in collaboration with the actual Patrick Ta face brush itself and use that to start to give me some nice coverage. Okay, so now that I look like a literal glazed donut from this dewy foundation, I'm gonna go ahead and do the brows quickly off camera to save time and then go back to finish the rest of the skin. Okay, so now that the brows are on, I'm gonna go ahead and start cream contouring the face using the Patrick Ta Cream Contour Powder Bronzer Duo in the shade She's Chiseled, and start to give myself a new bone structure. Okay, so now that I look like I just got fresh off the surgery table getting FFS, I'm gonna go ahead and dip into some cream blush. So today I'm gonna be using the One Size Cheek Clapper blush in the shade Fat Ass and use that to help warm up these cheekbones. And I also know that a lot of people usually have different blush placements depending on their particular face shape. For me, I like to apply my blush here on the highest points of my cheekbone in order to give me a more lifted, sculpted, supermodel-esque look. So next I'm going to go in with two different concealer shades. I'm going to go in with the classic Maybelline Age Rewind concealer in the shade 160 in order to give myself a nice bright pink under eye. And then for the rest of my face, I'm gonna go in with a concealer. It's a couple shades lighter than my skin tone, but still has like the same golden undertone as my natural skin in order to brighten and highlight the center of the face. And then also one trick that I like to do with my under eye concealer area is I like to bring the concealer down the side of the nose up against that nose contour in order to really snatch the sides of the nose. Okay, so this is what the skin is giving with all the creams and liquids done. So next what we're going to do is obviously set all this in place. So I'm going to use the two one size powders. I'm going to go in with the pink setting powder on the under eye, obviously, where I put that pink concealer, and then use the translucent on the rest of the face. So what I like to do for concealer is to prevent any under eye creasing, because we don't want no creasing. We're gonna quickly blend this under eye and then immediately go in with some setting powder to set those in place. And that will prevent as much creasing as possible. And then also just a general rule of thumb that I like to do when setting my face is I like to take a very thin layer of powder first by blotting the excess on the back of my hand, so that way the initial layer of powder doesn't cause the skin to look too cakey. Okay, so now that the face is all set in place and I look like I literally have a filter on, I'm gonna go in with a bit of a hydrating setting spray. I'm using the e.l.f. Stay All Night setting spray in order to melt all that powder into the skin. Okay, so now that all those powders are melted into place, I'm gonna go in with a bit of some foundation powder, because oftentimes when you use a translucent powder on the skin, it can give you, especially if you're a person of color, it will give you a little bit of a white cast. So I'm gonna bring some color back to the face by going in with a foundation powder. Now that I've given the skin back some color with some of the foundation powder, I'm gonna go in and sculpt the face and bronze it using the shade She's Bronze from Patrick Ta, and then to contour with a more neutral tone color with She's Chiseled. And then also another tip that I like to do is when it comes to contour, I like to take a smaller, more detailed brush as opposed to using a large fluffy brush that I use for bronzer. So that way I can precisely really define and chisel the areas that I really want to. And then also another tip that I would suggest when it comes to contouring the nose is that the difference is that when it comes to contouring the nose, you want to use a shade that's not too different from your skin tone, because if you use one that's too dark, it'll easily look way too harsh. So I would recommend using a darker bronzer and contour on the forehead, cheekbone, and jaw versus using a lighter one on the nose. So next I'm going to use some powder blush. Today I'm going in with the Patrick Ta Monochrome Velvet Blush in the shade She's Passionate, which is like a soft, warm-toned rosy pink, along with the Makeup by Ariel blush brush, which it's a very soft, fluffy brush that gives you a very diffused, mid-tone, Kylie Jenner type of blushing look. So next I'm going to go ahead and start baking. I'm going to be using the Coty Airspun powder to carve the cheekbones, and then for the under eye / bridge of the nose, I'm going to be using the Ben Nye powder in the shade Pretty Pink in order to reinforce that pink under eye again, as well as just prepare for any like potential fallout that may get on the under eye area. Okay, so now that the face is baking in the oven, I'm gonna go ahead and start doing my favorite part, which is of course the eyes. So I'm gonna be using today the Morphe 35XS palette in order to create a nice neutral toned winged out cut crease with a bit of a wing liner, a little bit of a smoky under eye, and yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, so since we're obviously going for more of like a simple neutral eyeshadow look, I'm not going to be using my normal white P. Louise eye base since I'm not working with any crazy colors today. And instead I'm just going to be dipping straight into these eyeshadows on an unprimed eye. And then also, since we're going in with eyeshadow right now, I want to go on a quick tangent about personal color because normally when most people think of like a nude or basic eyeshadow look, they usually think of colors like this, like these types of bronzy, nude, flesh tone colors. However, if you know anything about personal color, these colors are not necessarily always the flattering on every person or every skin tone. Okay, so what I mean by that is when we look at the concept of personal color, it's basically a theory that certain colors look the best on you depending on your eye color, your hair color, and your skin tone. So people who are warm toned like myself, we would be classified as either springs or autumns, whereas people who are cool toned would be classified either as a winter or a summer. And then if we look at the personal color wheel, we see that each season is split under three categories. So for example, for spring, we have light spring, warm spring, and bright spring. So looking at my personal color palette as a bright spring, if you look at my color palette and you pay attention to it, there aren't really that many like brown tones besides obviously this um it's like butterscotch brown, this camel brown, and then these two dark chocolate browns. But aside from that, the majority of the quote unquote neutral colors in my color palette actually consist of like these whites, grays, and dark charcoal blacks. And then what's more interesting for me as a bright spring is that if you look at my worst colors here, it shows that those types of neutral, nude, flesh tone colors are actually my worst colors, along with these types of muted pastels here. So that is why in order for me to achieve this neutral eyeshadow look that still complements me as a bright spring, I'm going to be dipping into a lot of these whites and ivory colors, these warm toned light grays, these charcoal grays as well here, and then this off black color as well. So ultimately what I'm trying to say with this message is that you should be using neutral and nude tone colors that complement you the best and that are in your color palette if you want your features to properly stand out in the way they should. And then obviously, disclaimer, you don't have to do this. You don't have to believe in the concept of personal color since it's merely just a theory. However, as someone that personally believes in personal color, I will be sticking beside her, period. Okay, so now actually going into the eyeshadow tutorial, I'm first going to be going in, for me, this warm toned light gray here first and using that as my transition color. So as you can see, when it comes to this warm tone light gray as my transition color, I'm using this to pretty much drag it across my entire crease, as well as lift and extend towards the tail of my brow in order to achieve that winged out cut crease later on. Okay, so now that I have obviously smoked out this transition across the entire crease and of course lifted it up for that winged out cut crease, I'm going to be next dipping in with a darker transition color. So I'm going to be using this slightly darker, more cool toned or neutral gray, and using that to slightly deepen the crease more. And then lastly, to really take it there, I'm going to be going in with this off black color here in order to deepen the crease as furthest as it will go. And then obviously it doesn't matter if if you think it looks too messy at first, because obviously number one, we're gonna cut the crease. And then obviously now that we've gone into our darkest shade, we're gonna be going back in with the lightest shade to blend out those edges. So now that obviously all three colors have been blended together and it's a bit smoky, we're going to go in with literally some Vaseline and use that to create the cut crease that we want. And I know some people like to use micellar water or a makeup wipe, but personally for me, I like to use Vaseline since it's a very thick product, so it's easily controlled, whereas micellar water and stuff like that can be very watery and very hard to control. Okay, so now that I have mapped out where I want the cut crease to go on both eyes, I'm gonna take a thin little liner brush that I have and use the end of the brush and wrap it around a paper towel, making sure that the point is as thin as possible like this, and using that to remove the Vaseline, to remove all the makeup on top, to prepare for the paint that we're going to use next. Okay, so as you can see, I went ahead and removed the Vaseline, and now we have a pretty sharp cut crease, if I do say so myself. And I also know I said that I wasn't going to use the white P. Louise base, but I forgot that obviously after I cut the crease, I have to obviously use an eye paint as a base for the next eyeshadows that we're going to use. So right now, as you can see, I'm currently going ahead and cutting the crease and adding this paint to the lid in order to give a base for our new eyeshadows. Okay, so these are what the eyes are looking like with the paint applied onto the lid. So now for the lid, to set the P. Louise base in place, I'm going to be using this off-white ivory foiled egg type of color in order to provide a new base for the next colors. Okay, so now, like I said before, I'm just packing this color onto the eyelid where I put that base, but I'm also trying to be careful not to go onto those grays and black that we used earlier. Okay, so now that the lids are set in place with the ivory eyeshadow, I'm going to go in with an actual like icy bright white eyeshadow in order to give us more of an inner corner highlight. Okay, so bam, as you can see, the inner corners of my eyes are now brightly highlighted with a icy white. And now I'm going to be doing a little bit of some detail work because I want this crease to be as sharp as possible. I'm going to go back in with my black and line the edge of that crease and smoke it out with the grays in order to, like I said, make the crease as sharp and as sickening as we can possibly get it. So now that the eyes are all nicely defined and resharpened again after I've packed those two white shades on the lid, I'm gonna go in and start doing my my black liner. And for liner, I don't like to go super up. I like to go my eyeliner more straight in order to horizontally elongate the eyes. Okay, so this is what the eyes are giving with the liner. Very fierce, very that girl, very... So now that I finished the liner, I'm just gonna go in and start with the lower eyelid. So to start, I'm gonna be using a white paint in the waterline in order to help open up the eye, but kind of avoiding the part where I put the inner corner liner. Okay, so now this is what the eyes are looking like with the white waterline, nice and bright, nice and big, nice and awake. So now we're going to go in with a black and essentially tight line that along the lower lash line and then smoke it out with the same grays that we used on the crease. So as you can see with this eye, I'm literally just patting this black onto my lower lash line and then smoking it out with that gray. So now that we've pretty much finished the entire eye, I'm just finishing it off with some mascara, of course. Okay, so now this is what the eyes are giving with the mascara applied. I know some people would do a lash after this, but personally, I'm just not really into lashes. I just prefer to use a basic, good mascara that I can always trust and rely on. So now that we have done the eyes, I'm just gonna go ahead and wipe off this bake and we'll go back into the skin. And then once again, like I've mentioned before, I like to spray setting spray in between the steps of my makeup routine in order to melt those powders into place. So that way the skin doesn't look super dry and ashy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a cream blush on top of my powder blush. This is a technique that I learned from watching Patrick Ta, is that he likes to use a cream on top of powder in order to help give a natural glow to the skin instead of using a super glittery chunky highlighter. So this is what the cream blush looks like on top of the powder. Very nice and glowy and pretty. So now for the next step, I'm going to take a big fluffy brush and go in with a brightening powder. I'm using the one from Dragon Beauty, and I'm going to be using the colors to essentially reinforce the placements where I put my concealer. Okay, so obviously now that I've done the brightening powder, as you can see, it's very intense, very strong. But what we're going to do to help fix that is we're going to go back in with the foundation powder and blend the edges around where I put the foundation powder so that way it looks more seamless and looks more blended. So now this is what the brightening powder looks like, all completely blended out. So now I'm going to go in with a powder highlighter, mainly to highlight the bridge of the nose, a little bit on the brow bone, and that should be it for the rest of the skin. So now for the lips, I'm going to go in and start lining the lips with a brown color similar to my natural skin tone. And then for the lipstick in the center, I'm going to go in and kind of match it to the blush that I have going on by using this like rosy pink color in the middle. And then of course a gloss on top. Okay, so now the lip is on. So now of course I'm going to fix it in with another dose of some more setting spray. Okay, you guys, this is pretty much my full go-to Full-Glam makeup look all complete. Let me know if you think now it's more achievable for you guys now that you've seen me do it firsthand in front of you on your screens. Also, feel free to let me know what you guys feel in terms of your opinions of, do you prefer these types of verbal tutorials more, or do you prefer like my old tutorials of just having the music in the background? Personally, I feel like I prefer these more because I feel like a lot more people are going to be more engaged with this type of content more, and also being able to follow along to what I'm saying and what I'm instructing. But yeah, feel free to let me know your opinions down below in the comments. Feel free to like if you liked all this content. And then, like I said before, I'm also registered with the Patrick Ta contest with his collaboration with Orbit. So feel free to go to my Instagram bio and click the link, not in the description, child. This is not YouTube. Click the link in my Instagram bio in order to vote for me, and hopefully your girl will probably win and get flued out to Los Angeles. But until next time, you guys, bye.